There is a place where consciousness exists outside of our bodies that some people have an apparent ability to access. What if it's not that hard to get there?
Science and institutions have hand-waved away the inconvenience of a non-physical world. And this isn't about religion or spirituality. It's just about the fact that we're connected to something bigger. And if you believe that, you're not gullible or silly or ill-informed. You can be extraordinarily smart and intelligent and see that there's a non-physical world. And that might be the more scientific thing to do than to just ignore it altogether.
The Telepathy Tapes was the #1 podcast in the world, launching telepathy and psi phenomena into public conversation. The Telepathy Tapes host Ky Dickens joins us to uncover the controversy surrounding Season 1 and discuss how Season 2 will convince even the most skeptical scientists that there's more to reality and consciousness than we've ever fathomed.
We started hearing from a lot of nurses and doctors and caregivers who were saying, hey, this telepathy is not just with non-speakers, it's with people with Alzheimer's or strokes or in comas or dementia in particular. There's something to do with not being as tethered to your physical form. We try to go find, are there legit mediums? Can we scientifically prove it, vet them, look at them from every angle?
Tell us what you are hoping Season 2 of the Telepathy Tapes can achieve.
I hope Season 2 will prove that consciousness is fundamental. It is the most basic part of our universe. It became before all physical things. Consciousness survives the physical body and is engaging with us all the time, whether we have a body or not.
Have you opened up any of your own telepathic or intuitive abilities?
Hi, I'm Mayim Bialik.
And I'm Jonathan Cohen.
And welcome to our breakdown.
This is an exclusive look at Season 2 of the Telepathy Tapes and some of the biggest topics that are going to be covered that align to many of the conversations that we have been having on this podcast for the last year.
If you haven't heard of the Telepathy Tapes, you can probably hear about it in about a dozen episodes where we reference conversations about what is possible to access outside of what we can see, touch, smell, and experience. The Telepathy Tapes was created by Ky Dickens, who we have in person here today to talk about some of the biggest lessons from Season 1 of the Telepathy Tapes and what we can expect in Season 2, which is all about consciousness. What are the different ways that people can step outside of their bodies, be it in death, from accidents, from Alzheimer's disease, and what can we learn about the places that you can go if you do not believe that your body is all that is you?
There are some phenomenal and really unbelievable stories of people who have information and receive information that they could not possibly otherwise know.
What's really important about this conversation that we have with Ky Dickens is that she doesn't presume to be able to explain everything that she has witnessed, everything that she has cataloged, or everything that we're going to see in the documentary that will be released next year or in Season 2. But we have a fantastic time talking with her about the limitations of materialism and the ways to best communicate with a larger audience, things like remote viewing. What happens when the brain starts shutting down and new abilities are acquired. We cover everything that's coming in Season 2, as well as some pretty out there things that even she cannot yet explain.
We discuss 2 different types of telepathy, which is fascinating. And also she describes the scientific experiments with rigorous scientists that are trying to prove to people that this is much more than a one-off phenomenon.
Also, can plants communicate with us? Ky's going to tell us a very personal experience that points towards yes.
As well as explaining that psi ability and remote viewing specifically, children can learn it very quickly. Take a second and subscribe anywhere you're listening or watching. We are so grateful to be doing these episodes and having these conversations, and subscribing is the easiest way to help support the show. We really cannot thank you enough.
We cannot wait to share with you someone we've been wanting to have on since we first got turned on to the Telepathy Tapes. She's here in person with us. Ky Dickens, welcome to the Breakdown. Break it down. I have to say, it's very, very strange to have you in person because I know your voice very well. It's like it lives inside my head. I had never listened to a full podcast all the way through until I listened to the Telepathy Tapes. So I became intimately acquainted with your voice. And anyway, I am living my own episode of being inside of the Telepathy Tapes with your voice.
I love that.
It's a very exciting week as season 2 just dropped. Start us off by telling us what you are hoping season 2 of the Telepathy Tapes can achieve.
After listening to season 1, I hope most people left feeling a little uncertain about consciousness and the materialistic paradigm in which we live. And hopefully many people realize that there might be more going on, like telepathy or just a deeper level of consciousness or communication that we're aware of in our physical bodies. And so if you left season 1 feeling pretty convinced that telepathy is happening for some people, if not all of us on a very subtle, in a subtle way, I hope season 2 will prove that consciousness is fundamental. It is the most basic part of our universe. It became before all physical things, and that consciousness survives the physical body and is engaging with us all the time, whether we have a body or not. So I think that will be the takeaway from season 2.
So those are very big goals of consciousness, right? So the first being consciousness is fundamental. The second, that when the body dies, the vessel, as it were, there is a place where consciousness exists, and that in different ways we're always able to tap into that no matter what, right?
Yes. Yes.
And that consciousness is interacting with us all the time, which
All the time.
needs a lot of unpacking because just brings up a lot of questions. Like, is the universe intelligent and has a plan or not? Or
Yes.
How is it interacting with us?
Yes. And I think our episode 3 answers that question.
Solved. Case closed.
I mean, I hope so.
Conversation's over.
Because I think what you have to look at is what do we know about the universe? It's always creating. It's creating and then destroying and creating again. Like, that is baseline, right? It's all creation, like from like the stars to the earth to all of us to crystals, like everything's been created. And so it makes sense if consciousness likes to create, that it's going to create through us. And somehow us humans can hear it. I mean, I don't know if bats and like weasels can pick up a song or a story, but we certainly can. And what does that mean? And also the fact that we will, with our very precious time on Earth, create thousands of different types of lamps or homes or, as Liz Gilbert says, tons of chairs. Like, why? You just need one chair. And so that brings up a lot, I think. And we know, in our episode 3, we talked to not just creators, but like thinkers and mathematicians and people who will say, like, if I don't grab an idea, it will go on to someone else. And sometimes an idea will come, but if you aren't, ready for it or giving it the time, it will leave you. And if you come back to it, it might just be like a dead limp part of itself. You can push it and prod it and it won't come back. So what does that mean? It seems like consciousness has a will that it wants to make manifest through us. So, I mean, we explore all of this in season 2.
I should say my secret reason for having you here is I want to pitch a podcast where I just talk about every episode of the Telepathy Tapes with you, and we get to talk about everyone in detail. And we're not going to do that because we've done that with at least a dozen other episodes where we've had guests on and we've poked and prodded and what does this episode mean? We're fascinated with not just the Telepathy Tapes, but we're fascinated with the fascination about this aspect of our consciousness and our conscious ability to communicate in other realms. When people would say to me, oh, I listened to the first episode. Oh, I don't know if I'm into it. And I just kept saying, keep going. Keep going. Whatever you think is about to happen, keep going. And by the time you get to the end, what is opened up is what sounds like an opening to season 2, which is with all of these incredible examples and all of the, ups and downs that you can go through with each of these individual journeys. The sort of thesis that comes out of season 1 is there is a place, right? There is a place, a metaphysical place, a mythical place, right? We don't really know. We don't know. But there is a place where consciousness exists outside of our bodies that some people have an apparent ability to access. And what if it's not that hard to get there, right?
Right.
So that, for me, is sort of like where we then head into season 2. Tell us what else season 2 is going to cover in the field of consciousness.
So where we left season 1, I mean, it kind of leaves with someone passing away. And other non-speaking individuals with apraxia, who we talk about in season 1, if you haven't listened to it, who are able to communicate telepathically from a long distance, are able to telepathically communicate with this young man who passed away.
And they also know
where he is and what he looks like.
And when he
died.
That,
yeah.
I mean, I was like, someone explain it.
All right.
That's the striking moment where these children, without being told, there's no possible way that that information could have gotten to them, all seem to know that a friend of theirs passes.
Yeah. That kind of brought up some questions around consciousness, surviving death, and who else can access it, and what is it? Like, where are we going? Because it doesn't seem to be that out of reach for some of the non-speakers that we profile in the first season. So our first episode looks at near-death experiences, going back not just recently, like 5,000 years in ancient civilizations, from China to Sumer to, Mesopotamia, and how many of our afterlife beliefs that popped up all over the world and look very similar weren't just ideas. They were reports from people who'd been there and come back. And so we kind of look at that. And if we can understand like what people are thinking or saying, where we're going, and this has been, throughout Native America, like all over the world, same concept of where we're going, then from there we can look at, okay, well, if we are going somewhere, it seems that way, then can you communicate from that divide? And then we look into mediumship and try to unpack it scientifically, but also compare if mediumship is real and someone's connecting with spirits. Obviously, the means of doing that would be telepathy. And we bring in a non-speaker in episode 2 who can both communicate from a distance with the living as well as the dead.
Can you explain what that's like, just for us to understand someone who is distinguishing between this is a person who's alive and I'm able to tap into their brain, their consciousness, their thoughts, versus, oh, this is a person who is not here anymore and I have information that only you and they would know.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. And she's a joy to talk to, and she's young. She's 11, so the mediumship really started happening, I think, for her big time after season 1 came out. And her mom started saying she's being visited all the time, but these are messages from people we barely know. Or like we'll be on an airplane and she'll say, you need to tell this person that.
No, that freaks me out.
Yeah.
Any examples of things that she got on airplanes that like people needed to know? Like, it's not like, hey, you should tie your shoe.
No, it's very specific.
In season 1, the boy who knew the guy was writing the book.
Josiah. Yeah.
That one, I was like, I can try and explain and anecdote my way out of everything. When I got to that episode, I'm stumped. So this sounds similar. There's information that is accurate and specific that can be communicated.
Yeah. We have this example in that episode 2, where she starts typing, says, I have a message for Hunter Chastain, a very specific name. And the mom is like, I met this guy once at like a conference. And it was from his mother who had passed. And, the non-speaker, the mom's name is Maura. She didn't know that this mom passed. And then Amelia starts typing like something about horses and the Derby and all this stuff. And she's like, what the heck? So she calls this man, Hunter Chastain.
No.
And Hunter's like, my mom passed and her thing was the Derby. And I've just recently started teaching my daughter to ride horses.
No, it makes me feel scared. It makes me feel scared.
What makes you feel scared about it?
When things like that are articulated, I don't have a materialist framework to wrap my head around it.
Right.
So what it leaves open is like every possibility of things that we're told cannot be real.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like this huge what if. And
exactly.
he's just like, that's what I predicted. Like, he's Mr. Energy. Like, I knew it. Like, when we started listening to Telepathy Tapes, he's like, oh, yeah, totally.
What I think happens to you is that you feel for a moment, because you think so much.
Right.
And you just, brain is constantly humming.
Yeah.
And for a moment, when you're speaking, you're sharing that example, what happens, in my opinion, is that she feels just how thin the veil is to the other side.
Yeah.
And that the division between living, dead, what's said, what isn't said is so paper thin that with the right tool, with the right sensing, it's just there.
Right.
And then also it may be like, if that is true, well, it starts to break down her
Right.
worldview.
Right.
But then also she's like, are they hearing all of my thoughts? Because there's a lot of thoughts in there.
They're mostly about you.
That's the trickiest topic, actually, that we tackle this season, because mediumship comes with all sorts of charge around it.
A lot of baggage.
A lot of baggage, right? And if like a sanctioned holy man can talk to the dead, like that's really okay. Then you're, holy. But if you're a woman doing it, you're a witch.
He was like, the derby was her thing. What else was in that message?
That's one of the things we look into. I mean, mediumship covers a lot of baggage. I mean, and there have been like smoky fake seances and, apparitions. And it's like been the most exploitive, crooked field, if you will. And in that episode, we try to go find, are there legit mediums? Can we scientifically prove it, vet them, look at them from every angle? And then we do a deep dive on one of those mediums. And then she meets this little girl, Amelia. Because what happens with Amelia is she's being overcome by not just non-speakers who want help because their parents haven't taught them to spell and they're locked they're locked in their body, but also spirits. And so we ask her, like, is there a difference? Like, how does a spirit sound versus a non-speaker? And she says non-speakers are really loud and persistent and like probably sound more like us if they're living. And that the spirits feel much more subtle and quiet, but they're like almost like universally happy. It's interesting, right? But she just wanted to be left alone and didn't know how to handle that. And then her mom was like, once people realized that she could hear, it's like the influx of both non-speakers and spirits were coming through. But from the guise of mediumship being an exploitive field, we kind of look at that because what does this 11-year-old have to gain? Nothing.
That's the best part of
Right?
it coming
Yeah.
through the vessel of an 11-year-old. It's
Right.
not monetized.
Right.
And this is kind of where I was going with
Right.
what did the message offer the person? Because it's like she is being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And she doesn't know what to do with it, I would imagine.
Right.
And I've heard about this before where people who have an intuition or an ability to hear other realms,
Yeah.
like maybe there's a lack of people in the call
Yes.
center. So if one of
Right.
them is in the call center who shows proficiency, they
Yes.
get overwhelmed. And then I'm like, well, are the messages she's able to share with people really impactful? And if she's not monetizing it, then that sort of gives a little bit more objectivity.
Right. She's a very inconvenient thing for people, right? Because you can't just say, oh, she's trying to make money off of this or do this or do this. It's like she just wants to help people. And I forgot how she said it, but we have this line in the episode of her being like, when people hear this, they know they can become happy that their loved one isn't gone. Like they're right there. And that's hard to wrap our head around. But I think you just alluded to this because there is something about like once something turns on, and this is something I discovered in this. I didn't know about this until we started like really going into full hog, all things different. In season 2 was that like it does seem if you turn on one of these gifts, others come on. Once the telepathy tapes came out, we started hearing from a lot of nurses and doctors and caregivers who were saying, hey, this telepathy is not just with non-speakers, it's with people who have Alzheimer's or strokes or in hospitals or in comas or dementia in particular. And it was like a lot of nurses and doctors saying, this is true for us too.
Nurses and doctors are reporting that patients who are nonverbal or have dementia are finding a way to communicate with them without words.
Exactly. But these aren't non-speakers with apraxia or autism. These are non-speakers because of a stroke or dementia. And so there was a man, and we did a talk tracks episode on this, which was like where we unpacked season 1. And his wife had early onset dementia. She started talking to him and telling him how to help her go to the bathroom quicker, go in the car. I mean, just the most fundamental thing. So it doesn't take 35 minutes, it takes 4. And it would work. So he's like, I can hear you. I can hear you. But once that turned on for him, he said all of a sudden, like kind of some of that spirit stuff turned on too. And he's like, I don't know how it happened, but my wife suddenly was like, I'm going to do this out of necessity because you need to help me.
And
go to
it
the bathroom.
opened a portal.
It opened something else. Yeah.
Which, from a like neuroanatomy perspective,
Yeah.
right? What we're saying is if you are tapping into something because of, I'm just going to throw out an idea, because of a wavelength that you're able to drop into, right?
Right.
You're able to drop into some theta state or you're accessing something that in that frequency,
Yeah.
right? It's like you're tuning
Yeah.
the knob of the universe
Yeah.
to be what you now are open to hearing.
Yeah.
That other people, if they are not tuned to that frequency, they just don't have access to it.
Yeah.
Yes, and once you learn to tune where you previously were not tuned, right? Like your antennae were sort of this broad scope where you hadn't actually gone into a specific channel, then you can tune to other channels more easily. So the mechanism is actually adjusted and becomes more sensitive. Let's just unpack here for a minute the amount that we just discussed, because
What? It's not a big deal to be like, oh, consciousness exists and people in comas can communicate. You just got to tune it right.
there's a lot of our episodes where I feel like we talk about things in other episodes and then like we have a hard time wrapping them back together. So, for example, we talk about people who have this very advanced dementia having moments of lucidity near the end. Actually, Martha Joe.
It was with a death doula. And she said sometimes people who are completely nonverbal.
For like months, years even, come back and have this. And so you're like, the neuroanatomy has been damaged. And yet for a moment, they're totally coherent and making their goodbyes before passing. And in your example, what we're suggesting is that the person and all of their knowing, functioning capability exists outside of the physical form. And when the mechanisms and structure of the physical form are no longer able to provide that communication.
But it's twofold because Kai's taking it one level deeper. It's not just that it exists. It's that it has intention.
Yeah.
It wants to be heard, right?
Yeah.
It wants to reach out and make connection,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
what you
Yeah.
can see or
Yeah.
hear.
But in that version, it is the general consciousness or the individual's consciousness or the reflection of the larger consciousness that is the individual.
Donald Hoffman, who has a mathematical model for this,
Ooh.
what he said is there are individual consciousnesses that collectively can exist, but also have an individual will, as it were.
Right.
And he shows this mathematically with phenomenal matrix.
It gets very complicated very
Wow.
quickly to anyone who's not a mathematician.
Yeah.
It's very, very nerd level math. But the notion would be
Yeah.
that there is a collective consciousness, but that they are
Individuated as well.
correct,
So it's like droplets in an ocean,
right?
kind of, right? I mean,
Yes.
That each droplet has an intention and agency, but also that they're operating as
Yeah.
a collective.
yeah. Gosh, what would be a better metaphor for that?
Thomas Campbell describes it as there is your consciousness, there is someone else's consciousness, and then there's the larger consciousness system. All those nodes are a part of each of those nodes are a part of the larger.
Like we're all hands extending from it, which, right, to like learn more, and the more opportunities and experiences we have, the more we can like grow and know.
I forget also, I think maybe in Donald Hoffman's conversation where it just occurred to me, I'm like, if we are perceiving and participating in consciousness and we're sort of go back to the radio, we're tuning that frequency. What we tune is then fed back into the larger system of consciousness wanting to know itself through us.
Right.
How do you, as the person who's holding all of this, what do we do with that? How do we fit this into a larger picture?
It's really tricky because I think there's a lot here. One is that I think our structures of science and institutions have sort of really kind of like taken a large leap or like hand waved away, like the inconvenience of a non-physical world. And it's really, I think, caused us to feel a lot of loss and confusion. And this isn't about religion or spirituality or anything like that. It's just about the fact that we're connected to something bigger. And if you believe that, you're not gullible or silly or stupid or misguided or ill-informed or all these things that, I mean, I know I used to be like, oh, I can't believe in God, because then, it's like, that's not true, I don't think. And you can be extraordinarily smart and intelligent and clear-minded and see that there's a non-physical world. And that might be the more scientific thing to do than to just ignore it altogether. So I think that's like a big pivot we all have to make. And I think if we can start making that together, we're going to have a lot more peace in our life and maybe in our society too. I mean, I don't want to sound like overly glossy, but like if you realize that you're connected to more, it's harder to just like not give it two flying shits on other people.
I totally agree. And that connects to a conversation we had recently about the need for re-enchantment, because as societies lose their sense of meaning and purpose and sense that they're connected to something greater, then we're subject to all the ills of modern day society, of addiction, of depression, of loneliness, of feeling like it's me versus you, and that's a bottomless pit of despair and distraction.
Yeah, I love that word, re-enchantment.
Someone said, like, I'd rather the story be that there is more, right? The materialists are so staunch in their objection to anything other than the physical form that they'll dismiss. And what Jeffrey Kripal says is that they'll just remove everything they can't explain from the table and tell you you're silly for even thinking about it.
Or try to harm the messenger. Like, this person can't be trusted and there's something wrong with them. And I know, like, Rupert Sheldrake has been like, just look at the data. Stop talking about me. Look at the data. I'll debate you any day, you know?
I wonder if you can talk to us a little bit about near-death experiences. You know, for us, this has been a realm that is so significant in terms of opening up a legitimate conversation.
Yes.
Right? Meaning it's fantastic to hear the amazing things that people experience.
Yeah.
And what does it mean? You know, what are the messages that people who cross over, right, bringing back? Yeah. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, as well as people who claim to have access, right? I mean, it's a kind of near-death experience to speak to people who have crossed over and bring that back as well.
Yeah.
What have you learned, and what can season 2 bring us in terms of insight about near-death experiences?
Well, I love that was your gateway, like, entry into, like, the unexplained, because we kind of thought, okay, people are coming into season 2. What is going to be the only palatable gateway in? And it was like near-death experiences, because they become kind of like irrefutable in some cases, because so many people have had them, where there's something called veridical perception. You know what that is? Okay, but for your listeners who don't, like, it's something you can verify during an NDE, a near-death experience. So, like, you might be out of your body and see something in the hospital and report, like one is really graphic, like a color bag that they were putting into, like, severed. I mean, that was okay. Like, we can do another example, like your grandpa getting peanuts out of the thing while they're waiting for you, like in surgery and stuff like that. And you know that they never eat peanuts. They don't even like candy. But then this was an example we heard. But then, you know, it came back and it's like, sure enough, he was having peanuts. Or
so it's an isolated piece of information that is occurring away from the physical periphery of someone's vessel, that also is not a generic piece of information. Meaning like, to say, I know you were in the waiting room wondering how surgery was going. That's very generic. That probably, God forbid, happens every time someone's in surgery. But to say, I saw, as Bruce Grayson talked about, I saw that you had a tomato stain on your tie and you were in the cafeteria, and when you were hiding the tie under
your lab coat.
Right.
Yes.
Those are pieces. Okay, so that's the kind of verifiable, right.
And like one of the examples that we talk about in episode 1 that I find so fascinating was a woman who was blind and had a near-death experience, and she explained, like, what she couldn't see when she came back. Her ring, the color of her hair, what was going on around her. I mean, she had a complete, vivid description of it, never having had sight before.
Jeffrey Long talks about this. Yeah. Also, he has some cases sight. Of these. Yeah. And people who had never had vision describing things that they oftentimes don't even have words for,
right,
because they've never, quote, seen them. Like, what is that? Right.
Well, and to your point, when she came back and she said, it's so cool, though, that you can see in front of you and behind you and up. And he's like, no, you can't. You can only see forward.
She thought everybody can. Oh, my God.
And she's like, what do you mean you can only see forward? That's not true. I could see everywhere. And it was so cool. And he's like, no. Like, that's not a thing. Like, we don't see everywhere. And then, but that he was like, what was so fascinating about that piece of information is that that's how a lot of near-death experiencers talk about their vision.
And the only way to explain that is that there are not two eyeballs that are looking forward and have, you know, this kind of view that's roughly, I don't know how many degrees, I can't remember what it is, but the notion that seeing is being.
Right.
That existing in whatever plane of consciousness allows you the ability to have access to all of the information, which is not only visual, it's not only auditory, there's something spiritual.
Right.
There's something that you're seeing and experiencing that can only be described as existing in some divine way, right?
Well, and a lot of these people will talk about being able to move at the speed of thought. Like, how cool is that?
And that answers come as quickly as you ask them. Like time is irrelevant.
Yeah. And one of the things that was fascinating is like we looked way back into like ancient accounts, and it was like, what was the best way to verify near-death experience 2,000 years ago? And it would be someone who had this near-death experience came back and was like, oh, Frank, whoever's dead. And it'd be like, that's probably not a name from back then, but whatever. And then, it would take 2 weeks upon months to you often get news of something like that. And then, like, of course, like 2 weeks later, they'd find out, yes, this person had died like 4 weeks before, and there's no way they would have known. So verifying like who else was in, this other place.
Right. I mean, Jesus, the most famous example of someone. I mean, but when you think about the language that is used to describe these, that was about 2,000 years ago, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of cross-cultural references with a ton of similarity. What did you discover in that research about ancient near-death experiences?
A lot of religious beliefs that started all around the world had the same common themes. And then what was sort of discovered by Gregory Shushan, who had studied past life religion, started finding that there was near-death experience accounts in all these religions as well. And the reason that the accounts of what the afterlife was like or this other place was like were so similar was because people were saying, well, I've gone there and come back again. And that the near-death experiences around the world were very similar in accounts, regardless of what religion, what background, what continent you were living in, that you left your body. There was usually some sort of guide there. You had some sort of life review. You were told you had to go back, but you didn't want to. This body and this place is not the win. It's not where you want to go. And often seeing loved ones, and then returning. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
It also is significant, and this is something Brian Murarescu talks about, and we spoke about with him in the Immortality Key, the secret history of the religion with no name. There were also long-standing traditions where meditative practices, transcendental practices were engaged that let you experience death before death. And he talks about this in some of the foundations of Western civilization as we know it, but there were very similar experiences described of leaving your body. It's ego death, right? And many people experience it with psychedelics. But there's a place, right? And there seems that there's many ways to get there.
The notion that all these religions are either brought on or have their sense of the afterlife informed by near-death experiences, for me, is very comforting because it removes the institution of religion and shows these common threads that are linking them to some kind of truth. Because it doesn't matter the story if it doesn't resonate with people. Like you can say, well, this part of religion doesn't make sense, or this institution has caused an enormous amount of damage.
Or I don't like those rules.
Or those rules don't make sense.
Yeah.
But things don't become this popular and strike a chord with this number of people unless there's a universality in it that has some resonance of a truth to it beyond what we can explain.
This is where I will say that also it's possible that, and this is something that came up in season 1 a lot, it's also possible that there's some collective experience that we are describing a certain way. I think season 2, it sounds like, is really taking that next level dive to say, what does it look like to sort of clinically drill down and see what can we actually understand about a larger truth.
Right.
Like the mechanism or
the depth. I mean, yeah.
And I think the thing that we keep stumbling across over and over again is like, oh, when you go way, way back, all of this was common knowledge. It's like we've forgotten. And like, especially in our plant episode, which was at first I'm like, what is this episode going to be about? Like, it feels like we need to do it, but what the heck? Like, plants communicate. Like, it feels tricky. And then, of course, there was a non-speaker in Connecticut who, as soon as she started spelling, was able to tell you, this is what's going on with you. This is the herb you need. You need to have astragalus, some Chinese herb that, like, how would the family know about that? They didn't. So she is able to diagnose someone with a very accurate herb diagnosis. You need to take this tea or have stinging nettles and hot water or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's the proper medicinal treatment for whatever is ailing the person. And it's proof of authorship. It's proof of telepathy or because she's like, I can communicate with plants. easily I can hear them. And at one point, her sister was the one helping spell with her when I would send the questions. And one of the questions like, well, how do you know what plant? And she goes, well, plants communicate. It's more like a smoke around you. It's so soft and so gentle and so there. But she's like, I'll know who lit the fire, like where the message is coming from, what plant. And she's like, they're so loving. They're so unconditionally caring for us. Like you think about plants really work together. They move to give each other sun. They don't try to take the sun away like we do. And so she had a lot to say about plant communication. But one of the questions we started asking, like, is she actually communicating with the plant, or is the plant some sort of like receptor of some like informational field that's like almost like bing, bing, and then like, can I do this, but it's like reflecting this information from like a greater consciousness to us? Or is she telepathically picking up on this young non-speaker has Cuban roots, and she said that she communicates a lot with her ancestors in Cuba and stuff. Is she knowing the knowledge? Because her abuela, we interviewed for this too, and her abuela was like, oh yeah, like there a lot of this, like, you know, we revered in my culture growing up and that type of thing. And it's like, or is it you're telepathically grabbing the information from someone else? Like, how is this happening? But when we went back into like some of the ancient cultures and stuff, there's so many people who talked about, no, the plant told me to do this with it. Or I could talk to the plants and say, I know you have poison XYZ, but I need to reach in here to grab this. So please don't make my skin itch. And just a lot of examples of this telepathic communication between plants and humans.
It makes sense to me.
This makes sense to you that plants speak to humans.
They would speak in a very soft way. They wouldn't be as loud as an animal would be.
Right. That's what makes sense to you.
That makes total sense. Although I think maybe poisonous plants speak differently. Maybe, could be wrong. Also, I think the question of where that information is coming from, is it a larger consciousness system facilitating the healing of a human being, and the plant is just a messenger or tool for the larger consciousness system? Or do plants have almost more agency or care over human nature? Because you would imagine maybe they're angry at us for like chopping them down and pulling them out of our garden.
Yeah.
But maybe not.
No.
Maybe they don't carry that.
I have been asking that a lot with the communication with animals and plants, and no one seems mad at us, which I'm like, how are they not mad at us?
I would be annoyed
Everyone
at
should
us.
be, all the things should be mad at us.
I mean, I have a spiritual answer to that, which is that in a place other than this one, if everything is suffused with love, meaning if that's sort of like the universal language, I mean, I'm going out on a limb here, but if that is the universal language, it's a place beyond our human understanding of what is possible in terms of tone.
Right.
And in terms of like, it's not that there's good and bad, it just kind of is.
Right.
Right? Like and that from people who have NDEs that we've spoken to, that is such a relief.
Yes.
And that is why the decision to come back
is so hard.
Because what would it, and I had to get chills on the right side of my skull, you know, what would it be like to be in a place where you don't have to make those judgments, right? Or people always say like, well, what about Hitler? Where is he? Right? People love to bring up these human, you know, judgment questions. You can't imagine when Buddha Betty said that even her abusers, even the people who abused her, the understanding she had of what they had to experience to hurt, it was next level. It was the definition of forgiveness and acceptance. So that's what I would imagine, again, if we're thinking,
if you were a plant,
if I was a plant, we can't use human terms. And I think that's what is so interesting that I'd like for you to touch on, which was a large focus of season 1. What is it, right, about people who, for example, have limited speech that can open up a portal to some kind of other understanding? And what do you think that says about what the brain allows us to experience? What did you learn about that? And what does season 2 offer in terms of who has this ability and why?
It's interesting because I finished up like one of our final interviews for season 2 right before this, and I was talking to a non-speaking young man who can communicate with horses and animals. And so this is going to answer your question, but it was really interesting because his mom was like, I always knew something was going on, and I wrote a book with him at one point, and I before the Telepathy Tapes came out, and she's like, I knew he was telepathic, and I was so scared to put it in there. And then And then we heard the telepathy tapes, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. Like, this is so wild. And she's like, so I started testing him. And she's like, I didn't know I could test him. And she's like, and suddenly he could do numbers, or I could think of a song in my head and he could start humming it or playing
So
it.
it wasn't just horses.
No.
What was he hearing from the horse? Like, give us an example.
Okay. So with the horses.
Because, like, I would think horses are like, I'm a horse.
Yeah.
Be like, the horse told me he's a horse. I'd be like, that's not really proof. What is this communication like?
Like, she would,
Everything's a cartoon in your head.
yeah.
Jonathan has a very special brother.
Uh-huh.
He has a traumatic brain injury, and he's special, and he sees the world in a very different way.
He's also extremely sensitive to other people's thoughts.
Yes, and emotions.
And emotions. So if you are thinking something very loudly around him, he will have a somatic response where he starts yawning, like he starts to be impacted.
We took him to the aquarium, and they had that day a very large alligator.
And you don't want to go near its face.
And the lady is standing in her little khaki outfit. All the kids are waiting to touch it, and we wait our turn. And I'm with Daniel. And she says, his name is Patrick. And Daniel says, how do you know? And she looked at him like, I was like, thanks, bye. But it occurred to like, how do you know? And so that's what I'm thinking. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry.
The kid has a horse.
We're very serious.
The kid has a horse.
funny.
We've been waiting a long time to talk to you, so we saved up all our best jokes. Okay. The kid has a horse.
The kid has and there was all sorts of examples of the horse would be sad because like a horse died, or there'd be something going on with the horse people. I mean, the horses, the horse community around death or sickness. And then he would tell his mom, and then the mom would find out separately that like, yes, this other horse is sick or had passed and stuff like that. But then she said that at one point Blackjack was dying, and she had to pick up her son and say like, Blackjack has cancer. But the day she picked him up to tell him that, he was really happy. And he's like, no, this is like good for Blackjack because I'll be able to still ride him on the hill and he'll be fine. And then now Blackjack is gone. But she was like, and she's like, he told me he went somewhere without his body, but he didn't start calling it the hill until after the Telepathy Tapes. And he told me, oh, what I used to call heaven, I think is actually the hill. And I go there all the time and et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, he said, I can ride Blackjack now. When I go out of body, I can meet Blackjack there, also out of body, and ride Blackjack. That is wild.
Well, and you're distinguishing it from, I can think about what it would be like. That's not what this child is communicating.
No.
Because when an animal dies, you can say, oh, I can be with them, or that's not what, no. Well, and there's a place that presumably that this child knows is not this corporeal being.
Yeah.
But I go somewhere and I can have experiences
Yes.
with this animal that I communicate with.
Yeah. And you asked right before that, which brought up the story, and then we went a million wonderful, beautiful ways, was like how, why, or how does this happen? And so he had said to his mother, when she's like, how and why did this happen? How can you do this? He's like, I had to survive. Like, I had no other way to communicate for a long time. I had no other way to engage socially. And this was my survival. And we will find a way to connect as human beings if you don't have one, which is so beautiful. And I've said this many times. I think this has nothing to do with autism. I think in the case of the non-speakers we feature in season 1, it's about apraxia, this mind-body disconnect, or not in your body. We've since heard, and we know of parents who have who've written in that have kids with Rett syndrome, DDX3X syndrome, Down syndrome, all sorts of things, who are like, this is true of my child as well. And it's not just the telepathy, it's also connecting with spirits or whatever. So that was really interesting. And then, as we know, it has to do with Alzheimer's as well. So there's something to do with not being as tethered to your physical form. Like, there seems to be another part of us. There's us, the one I can squeeze right now or do whatever. And then there's the other part of us that, if we're not functioning in all ways, is also there, right? With Alzheimer's and near-death experience.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's about a shift of consciousness.
There's also something about being tethered to language, reading, writing, and that part of the brain that works on that analytical level. When that's turned off or slowed down, compromised in some way, it leaves room for some other form of communication.
Do you explore, because one of the things that we talked about with Jim Tucker, there are children who claim that they have lived other lives. And there's been some really, really, incredible levels of detail research. I mean, this is what, Jim Tucker has spent a lot of his career, talking about. Do you have any sense of what is going on when people are experiencing the consciousness of other people?
I don't know. But I can think about what some non-speakers have said. And I mean, one is that time is we have multiple lives happening all at once. There's a young man in England that was like, yeah, you have multiple lives that are all going on at the same time in different places. That's hard to wrap your head around.
Physics does it. I mean, if you get deep enough into theoretical and quantum physics, there's explanations for spin and electrons and things.
Yeah.
Okay, so that.
And so this was also really weird, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around this. Is this time travel, remote viewing through time? Is it time folding upon itself? Is it a reincarnation thing? But so for the Telepathy Tapes film that we just finished our tests, like the big telepathy tests across rooms and states and all that stuff. And that was brand new group of non-speakers, brand new scientists, all the things were new to be like, look, okay, it's all new. It's, peer reviewed. And that group of non-speakers in Chicago are amazing. And one of the young men at one point starts spelling a word, and both his mom and the teacher are in the room, and they're like, what is this word? And they Google it, nothing. They look it in the dictionary, nothing. And then they start doing a deeper dive and probably went into AI or whatever. And finally, this word was used often in the 1200s, but it's out of, no one talks about it anymore.
What?
And he had spelled it correctly. And when they asked him about it the next day or a few days later, when they figured out what this word meant, they were like, how do you know this word and how did you use it correctly? And he's like, I found out from the Spanish magistrate in the 1200s. What? How is that an answer? And
the horse told me.
Yeah. But it was used correctly. And then they looked it up in terms of the Spanish magistrate, and all the things were coming together. And then something happened where he just was done talking about it. And they couldn't bring back that, he was just, okay, I'm done with that topic. But I need to follow up with them, because the question is how did he know that? And he said he went and talked to the Spanish magistrate.
Well, I don't mean to quote your own season 1 to you, but there was, I can't remember which episode it was, but there was, there's evidence of knowing language. Knowing things about
episode 7.
In episode 7. No, but how do we wrap our heads around that? The only way to explain it again is that information, right?
Yeah.
Is out there.
Yeah.
And you can pull from it.
Yeah.
And it's not linear, right?
Yeah.
Time doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
We're in some sort of, shape that you can just dip into all of it. I don't know.
I want to maybe blow your mind with a story, but I can't speak of it as articulately as we do in the show, because okay, so there's a savant who's in episode, I don't know, he's in season 2, and he's in the savant episode where we go and look at accidental savants, people who've been hit on the head.
This is where I was going to go with that
acquired
idea.
savants.
Yeah, acquired savants.
Yeah.
And there's some just born savants, but it's mostly people who had some stroke of genius. Well, he had an accident where he started seeing math everywhere, but more than math, fractals and light.
Yeah.
And what he says is how math and physics explain the world is they're only looking at the screen of all the possible opportunities that could be happening now, probabilities. But he sees beyond the screen, and he's like, what everyone is studying is right if you're only explaining the screen. And he's like, but I see.
Does he see the elves?
Past the
The
screen.
elves of.
I need to ask him. I know the elves.
The Terrence McKenna elves. That's who's behind the screen.
No, I don't think he sees
So
that.
he describes something that he's visually experiencing?
Yes.
Beautiful mind,
Yeah.
equations.
So
Yes,
he
yes.
sees outside of
He
time
sees
and
outside of
space.
the thing. And one of the things he says, and this is where, please don't quote me because I'm not going to do it right. He talks about everything is a spinning fractal, blah, blah, blah. And you can bring everything down to this one equation or item in the universe, which I don't remember what it is right off the top of my head. But he said that he started doing these language tests where if you look at the word, casa or home, or the same word for like abode in Russian or whatever, the like equation is the same behind everything.
So this is a mystical concept also in ancient Hebrew. There's a mystical concept that essentially the concept exists.
Yes.
And then every language will place its phonemes on it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So in ancient Hebrew, a lot of the words are onomatopoeic because like the word for fire, esh, that's the sound a fire makes is sh. So that the notion is like, that's why
I love that.
You get it?
Yeah.
My name Mayim is water. It's like a right?
Yeah.
So that the word is just the human articulation of the essence of it. I mean, that would be my best explanation.
Yeah.
Season 3 of Telepathy Tapes.
Yeah. There you go. Well, it's interesting. Like, so we talk a little bit to the Lakota in season 2 because their language is exactly the same. It's like what the bird would sound like.
Correct.
Or what,
it's like the essence of the thing, and then we try and put letters on it, right?
Yeah.
And indigenous languages traditionally weren't written; they didn't need to be codified, right?
I'm fascinated by people who have these injuries because what's happening, right? Like some part of their brain is disrupted, either shut down or becomes non-functional, and then they acquire some other skill that they did not have.
Before my dad had back surgery, he said to the doctor, "Will I be able to play piano?" And the surgeon was like, "Yeah." And my dad's like, "I couldn't play before." That was his dad joke before surgery.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be appropriate, obviously, to take people in double-blind studies and shut down parts of their brain to mimic.
No, you can't injure people by hitting them on the head with a sledgehammer and seeing if they acquire abilities. IRB would have a very hard time approving that.
That would not be my approach. My approach would be if there was some way to non-permanently shut down those parts of the brain to see if they could.
There are ways that you can essentially like freeze certain regions.
And do people get other qualities? And like, what would I be willing to trade off to be able to get like a couple languages?
I would like you to be able to have a conversation without checking your phone. I will exchange it for your dimple on your right cheek.
But, when the materialists who we speak to sometimes, and
we let them come on sometimes.
It's a very challenging conversation to have with them because they are very, very, very certain that none of this is true. And they come at it often with a level of ire and annoyance that you could even contemplate stuff like this. In the horse situation where, some horse used to, I think, did math and the counting horse, and then it's proven that the horse wasn't really, wasn't really counting. It was just very astute of body language. That doesn't explain how a child would know that a horse not near him has died because he's in communication with another horse.
In defense of materialism, what they would say is we're relying on an anecdotal report. For all we know, this child said every horse is dead, and what his mother reported or whoever, and this is not to disparage it, but materialists would say you cannot build a worldview off that kind of report because, as I said, what if the kid woke up and was like, all the horses are dying? And she'd be like, even this one? And he'd be like, yes, even that one. That's a different thing. And that's why season 2 is being a little more structured in the way that we're talking about things, because we can't build a worldview on just that.
There is an arrogance, though, in this idea that, like, we know all there is to know.
Yes.
Because that's what's exciting to me. I mean, they used to think that God made a rainbow. You know what I mean? Or the earth was flat. Like, there's many things we believed and that scientists were certain of, and then it changed.
We used to believe that everything we see is all that there is.
Right.
Until we realized, there's other wavelengths. And actually, we're looking at everything that's left over when this object has absorbed all of the other wavelengths that exist, right?
Right.
Or consciousness that most of us cannot access.
Right.
And what you have done is brought to the forefront a conversation about it may not be everyone, but if there's one person, right, that is experiencing this, that's significant for us as a human species.
Yes.
And it deserves attention, respect, and further research. That's what it means to be a scientist.
Exactly.
How has it been for you to be on the front lines of presenting and opening up people's minds, offering the notion that there is more? Have you felt attacked? Have you met the materialists?
I was so like blown away by all that I saw with the non-speakers and how widespread this is. And there's so much evidence of it beyond forget spelling or the easy things to try to attack. Like it's there with or without it, right? These kids are doing stuff from the author many states away. So I remember the first time that someone's like, oh, there was like a article in the Atlantic saying how I was like, it's controversial? Like I could not believe it. The vitriol in which some it was being received or like rebutted. And and then that kept happening. And then there was a lot of like hit pieces where, journalists would say, oh, we want to do this or this and take everything out of context or take all, it just like complete where every single person involved was like, what? Like, what is this? And so I wasn't prepared for that. I thought I just didn't know that could happen to that degree. Because it felt to me, I was like, but they're lying, not us. And so that was weird, because I'm like, I'm the type of person that's like, you should never ban a book and information is amazing. And obviously we should have the freedom of the press. And like, I believe in all those things. But it was so strange to be on the receiving end of like, wait, I'm the one that like they're thinking is like maybe bonkers or lying or somehow fraudulent, or you know what I mean? Like it was, and then I just had to be like, I think it was my dad, who's really a materialist, was like, this is great. He's like, they wouldn't be talking about it unless you're getting under their skin. And he's like, it's not going to be easy if you're putting out something challenging. Keep going. Because I was so worried about, I don't know, at least me, I'm always worried about like, oh, my dad was such a materialist, like such a nerd. He reads so much every day. He's so scientific. He does not believe in anything like this. And so it was a big leap for me to do this, not knowing if my dad would like disown me. And then I think going through so many conversations and footage and going to shoots and seeing stuff, I brought him, he's completely changed his mind by seeing it next to me. But when some of the articles come out in the magazines and newspapers I know he loves, it was so beautiful for him to say, this is awesome.
What do you feel like season 2 is incorporating that season 1 did not have, so that maybe you can refute some of the challenges that people had and were poking at?
Well, there's two things. I think for like non-speakers, the film will refute, I think, anything to do with spelling and all that stuff is just like, and the science. I mean, what's so great right now is the scientists have taken note, not all, but many have done their own telepathy tests now, have done their own message passing tests between non-speakers and people in different rooms. And I think the authorship is going to be put to bed. Telepathy tests have been now validated. There's been studies done at Stanford, University of Virginia, University of Oregon. We followed Dr. Julie Mossbridge, a former Northwestern neuroscientist. I mean, and it was like from different states. Like one of the tests that Dr. Mossbridge did, and they were on Zoom because it was like pre-trials from different states, was a neuroscientist calling from Oregon. I think she was in Virginia, and the student and his communication partner were in Chicago. They had a video on the screen that Dr. Mossbridge, had sent or whatever, hit a button and it went to this guy in Oregon. He was looking at a video with a word coming across it. The boy in Chicago starts describing the video.
No.
And spelled out the word.
No.
And that's it. It's done then. That's the most impossible telepathy test to do. And it was done.
It's fascinating. And recently we spoke to a materialist who said everything on telepathy in the past is absolutely debunked. There's no validity to it. And like, this is, a very important professor. And I'm like, where are the links? Where can, because he's like, if the research comes out, I'll look at it.
And also like when shooting the film, what was really interesting is a lot of the neuroscientists who've now been looking at this are like, there's two different types of telepathy. We think there's close proximity telepathy, where a lot of these non-speakers seem to be able to just like dip into the person next to them, like whoop, like mingling of their whatevers. And then there's this like much more common telepathy that all of us I think are familiar with, where there's an urgent need, an emotional something that happens where you someone's hurt, you need to call this person, XYZ. And I think that's happened throughout time and serves us really well. And that one is almost impossible to capture in a lab setting. I mean, how can you?
Yeah.
However, and I don't know if this was the non-speakers just trying to show off, but in Chicago, Dr. Mossbridge had been doing a bunch of tests over I think, months or weeks. I mean, we aren't involved with the test. We just document it. So she had to fund them and do her own stuff and do her own trials. We get to show up for one day, and that was it. She'd done tons of trials before this. On the one day we were there, the most unbelievable account of spontaneous needed telepathy happened while all the cameras were rolling.
What was it?
I don't want to say because it's like a huge moment in the film, but you see the telepathy happening and occurring, not just like throughout the building, but through like with a stranger in another place. And it's all captured. And so, I feel like any of the doubting of the non-speakers, the teachers, the families that came from season 1, I think the film will put that to rest. Season 2, I hope it will put it to rest. I don't know. We did our best. I feel good about it, but there's always going to be naysayers. But season 2 is a different quest, I think. It's less about validating the competence of non-speakers and the validity of spelling, and it's much more an exploration of consciousness and materialism.
In my family, we have an example of this. I wouldn't have thought of it as spontaneous telepathy when my mother was pregnant with me. My mother was pregnant with me, and she was being driven to a checkup appointment for me. I was born in San Diego, and they had just moved from New York, and my mom's sister was driving her. She was very pregnant with me, and they were driving to the doctor. And the way the story is told, my mother all of a sudden said to my aunt, turn the car around. We have to go back to mommy, my grandmother. And my aunt was like, what do you mean? We're driving to the doctor. My mother said, you have to turn around. My mother felt paralysis on half of her face and her body. And she turned around, and when they got home, my grandmother was laying on the floor and had had a stroke and had hemiparesis.
Wow.
Yeah. And,
wow.
We're Hungarian on that side of my family, and I meet a lot of Hungarian people who are like, oh, yeah, that happens in our family. It's also like,
really?
There's something about the Hungarian ladies, apparently, that we're supposedly have special powers, and my mom clearly has got something. My mother believes she manifests things all the time, but that specific experience, I can't explain that. If I'm believing what my mother reported, that would be a highly unusual thing to have happen, especially for her to experience paralysis. Now, she could be remembering it wrong.
That's
right?
what the materialist would say.
She could be remembering
People's
it wrong.
memory is faulty.
Correct. That the stroke could have been the next day or 2 weeks before. Which we don't know, and you can't put it in a laboratory. So, yeah.
Did this guy comment on all of the Gansfeld studies that have been done over the course of...
Jonathan felt woefully unprepared.
So I feel unprepared to defend the castle. We need a repository, like a document that we can go to and say, well, how about this? And what about that? And the next phase of our conversations needs backup.
Dean Radin, he kind of goes through on his iPad. He was doing it for my benefit, but then it was so helpful. We're like, oh, we'll just actually put this clip in the movie of him going through his iPad with all the different metadata around Gansfeld studies across the world. And how, when you look at the thousands of, maybe it's hundreds, I don't know, the many, 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 many Gansfeld studies that have been done across the world in different labs over a span of years, it's very statistically significant, as much so that if it was a pharmaceutical drug in a trial, you'd be like, yes, approved, but because it's dealing with something so woo. But what happens, I think, with the non-speakers in these tests is in the Gansfeld thing, it's above chance by 5, 6, 7%, which is still statistically relevant.
I mean, I don't know if it's just me playing out my own materialist's father attitude and looking for his approval, the way that your father sounds like it was very lovely that he came on board to this journey. But I do feel like it's a calling of mine to butt up and present information that the materialists either have not accessed or are actively trying to either ignore or discredit. And say, well, because I just want there to be some consideration and acknowledgement if there is real data, and again, I'm not a data expert, but I'm like, then people who analyze real data, which again, I'm not one of those people, should know about it and agree to it.
Yeah.
And if they choose to then ignore it because of emotional reasons or it's just too difficult to explain, purely reject it before evaluating it, that seems like a lack of communication.
Yeah. And I think that's the last option you gave is probably more reflective of what's happening, because some of those Gansfeld studies have been actually published in mainstream journals. The science is out there. It's just, if you can't explain why it's happening, which they can't. I don't think anyone can explain why it's happening or how it's possible. And that becomes a problem, right? But it is happening.
Most of this kind of, research into trying to understand these other states of consciousness, for those of us who are, not in the non-speaking autism community, right? Or in research around those, for a lot of people, it is about a shift of consciousness that comes usually from a specific kind of meditation, right? It's like when Thomas Campbell, as a, young physics student, tries transcendental meditation for the first time, and all of a sudden he's like rocketed into the universe and doesn't know where time is or his body is, and he's like, what was that? Like, that's something that most people need to learn to study, to drop into. What's special about, I'd like to study Thomas Campbell's brain to be able to say, what was it about being given some very basic instructions about breathing that I've heard dozens and dozens and dozens of times, and I've never gone to that place ever, and I'm trying and I'm thinking, I'm praying, I'm meditating. So there's something about certain brains, right? That seem to have some access to a state that is different than the one that we can explain. That's the most basic scientific thing that we can say.
Because even like lucid dreaming, I can't do that.
Right.
Some people can. Seems really cool.
I've had some experiences with like the yoga nidra practice, which is you're putting your body to sleep and you're keeping your mind awake, which many people say is this kind of experience. Like, often I just fall asleep.
Yeah.
I skip right through that theta state and I just go night-night.
I was like on a shoot recently, and like everyone at the table had this experience where they felt like they were being attacked by a monster at night. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Have you heard about this? But it's a sleep paralysis thing. It's like a thing that is really common that happens with sleep paralysis, but you'll actually see what feels like a being holding you down. And everyone at the table is like, no, I'm so certain it happened. I'm like, that did not happen. And that was me to completely describe. I was like, that was impossible. Like, what do you guys mean? Like, everyone had a...
Even Ky didn't believe it.
I was like, I do. And then I looked it up, and it was like, there's a common sleep paralysis.
For hundreds of, probably longer than hundreds of years.
It's called something. Oh, it was during the telepathy test. And it was like the DP, the producer, and someone else. We were all sitting having dinner afterward. And like one of them was like, I've never told anyone this, but like this has happened to me throughout time.
Got it.
Yeah. And I wake up and there's like something on me holding me down.
Yeah.
I've heard about people who've had this.
Yeah. And then like the guy was like, oh my God, I thought that was just me. And I thought, da-da. And then I was just like, wait, this is like too obscure that you boys are having the same thing. There must be some rational explanation.
So yeah, it's called night hag, a phenomenon in which a sleeper feels the presence of a supernatural malevolent being, but also a mare in Germanic and Slavic folklore would historically sit on your chest. A lot of people thought that this was one of the reasons that it was like an old wives' tale not to let a cat in the baby's crib, that the cat would sit on the baby's chest and suffocate them. So I think it's also, it's something that's...
But anyway, that's like a thing that happens to some brains that I've never experienced.
Right.
So it's like we have these things that happen in our brains that you might not experience that other people have.
It's like not everyone has to experience something. And that's what, a lot of materialists will say. Well, if that's true, if remote viewing can exist at all, everyone should have it. And I'm thinking...
And everyone should be winning the lottery all the time.
Like, oh, they'd be able to read the lottery. I was like, no, that's actually not at all how I would imagine that it works.
Yeah.
That's like saying if one person is a concert pianist, we can all be... Like,
right.
We all have different brains, abilities,
right.
like access to different things. So for me, like, that's sort of what resonated, from season 1.
Yeah.
Was like, there's something that's getting either released uninhibited, right?
Right.
Or accessed as some sort of portal. I don't think of it as magical because I think it's something tangible.
Right.
We just don't know how to describe it.
Right.
We don't really know what it is, but we're trying to chip away at it, and it's going to take all of us to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, here's what I think is really great about your show, and I think here's what's resonating about like a lot of stuff, just as we even talk about this, is I think for a long time it was felt really binary. Like, if you believe in this stuff, you're absolutely silly, you're not worth an academic discussion, you can be discounted. And if you do believe in it, you're woo-woo, you're like out of control, like you're a hippie wearing
delusional.
Yeah, you're like all the things. And then I think there's a
Did you say wearing purple?
No, Birkenstocks.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know. Yeah, and purple.
And purple.
Like all the things. Yeah. And I feel like most of us probably fall in the middle where you really don't want to believe in something without a credible reason to believe it. You want to be grounded in reality you want to have some sort of evidence and data to inform your facts and worldview, but you're also open to that there's maybe more than what we see. And you don't want just to be, I'm one or the other. I want to create a worldview that makes sense and is meaningful based on data and science and observation and anecdotal evidence.
Well, you don't want to be fooled in either direction.
Right.
Right? Like, you don't want to be so out there that, like, anything is possible and I walk in and it's the spirits of the house that are controlling me.
You know what? We know a lot of people like that. And those are the kind of people that when I spoke to them about the telepathy tapes, they felt like, and I'm just going to communicate this to you as a personal thank you, they felt like it was a giant hug from the universe, because many people felt like I always knew. I always knew that I could feel something different. I always knew I could be in touch with other things. I always knew there was more than what they told me to believe. And for many people, that's what season 1 of the telepathy tapes did. It was like, I don't need anything more.
Yeah.
I feel seen.
Yeah.
And like, if seeing people is the first step to opening that door, that's incredibly important.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's so hard to believe someone that is like has something to gain by making sure these things are real, right? Like a medium who's making money off it, or a psychic or whatever, and or a healer that sells a lot of books and sells out amphitheaters. I think it's very easy to be like,
What's the motivation?
Right.
Or if you have this wisdom, be like the Buddha. Sit under the tree and I will come get the wisdom.
Yeah, right.
And also, not to be a downer, but sometimes there are people who, like, when you say, oh, if you believe this, then you're also into other things. Like, sometimes they're into some practices that make it hard to function in everyday society.
Yes. And I think for the non-speaking individuals who were profiled in season 1, I mean, at least their lives as they were when we were filming them and talking to them, they often weren't going to school. You couldn't up yourself in the social ladder. You weren't going to make money. You couldn't profit off of anything. You couldn't even live outside of your own home. I mean, there's nothing to gain. And it takes so freaking long to spell a sentence. Like minutes, and often exhausted at the end. So it's like, you're not going to sit there and be like, I'm going to buffoon like everyone here. And, you know.
But in the same regard that people don't want to be fooled in one direction, I also don't want to be fooled that material reality is all that there is.
Yes.
And when we consider what we've learned about the mind-body connection, that we can change our pain tolerance, that you can MRI people with back pain and people without back pain, and sometimes like more than statistically significant, you can't tell from the images alone who has that pain, or the placebo effect experiments where people had fake knee surgeries and had the same outcome as real knee surgeries.
Yeah.
And
I like that one.
I mean, like, it starts to really change how we apply medicine.
Right.
Now there's a very scary slippery slope, which the materialists will say, well, and this was said to us recently, well, if you believe in God, you won't take medicine. So therefore the belief in God is dangerous.
What?
Exactly. If you feel more connected to something and less alone and less despair, and that you're a part of something greater than yourself, which can be described as feeling a sense of God and connection to that source, a universal consciousness, you know that your immune system works better. You recover from surgery better. You may have less aches and pains. You may feel stronger, more hopeful, and your body will respond accordingly. So, like, I don't want one side or the other to dominate the conversation.
Just to clarify, I think that what this counterpoint was many people would say, God told me not to take medicine. And so you could argue that simply saying you have a religious faith, that in and of itself doesn't prove anything. It doesn't justify anything, because people kill in the name of God.
Right.
People do horrible things in the name of God. They, I don't need to list all the things anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like the act of faith is more important than the fact of faith, right? Like, we know that believing in something, even if it's your own healing ability, is really good. And that is something materialists will jump on, is like, oh, well, then why does believing have to be the thing? Oh, I can only see blah, blah, blah if I believe in it. I don't know, but we know the placebo effect works. So believing matters.
And should be actually utilized much more. I
Yeah.
think it would save a lot of people's livers and immune systems if we use the placebo instead of a lot of the medications that we're told to take that in many cases are not helpful.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But it's an interesting thought exercise, because, like, even when you're talking about some of the stuff which is pretty, immaterial and unexplained, there is always this deep reverence, I think, from a lot of people, but how do we reach the materialist, or how do you reach that person out there? And there is part of me that's just like, that you don't have to reach everyone.
I would like you to.
Yeah. I mean, we're trying.
I really want that.
We're trying.
I really want that.
But like you don't, it's not like the mark of whether or not something's true, I think, it is like, can you change these minds? Can you change some minds? Can you change a lot of minds?
And I think that's part of the patronizing aspect of this argument, is it becomes this parent you can never please.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And that everything we do doesn't need to be to please our parent.
Right.
It needs to be to find what work is most meaningful for us. And for you, it's going down this path.
Yeah.
And maybe, in that structure, you'll please your parent.
I'm so like struck by that analogy, just because it was like my real life, like that my dad was that parent.
I wasn't even thinking of your dad, and also in the patriarchal structure that we live in, and also God as father. I mean, like all the imagery that we're told is that.
Also, do you have time to talk to my dad?
Yeah, totally. He should. You know what we should do?
Get all the dads.
We should start a dad listening community.
Oh, that would be interesting. Oh my gosh, that would be so sweet.
And they could have like a support group from recovering materialists.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you about remote viewing. Does season 2 incorporate remote viewing? Did that come up in the research? Because we've spoken to Julia about it. We've spoken to other people about it. Thomas Campbell, we've spoken to about it, and others. And it is, a fascinating example of, if I'm not tethered to my physical form, if my consciousness is able to move freely around this non-material world, if the people who have had near-death experiences have the ability to have 3D vision, then what else is possible?
I think we're going to do a whole season of remote viewing, because it feels like one of the most concrete psi abilities that many people can learn and experience. We know governments have poured a lot of money into it. There's a wonderful book by Annie Jacobson called The Phenomenon, and it's not about UFOs. It's about the CIA's psychic spy program.
Yep. We spoke to Angela Ford, who could frequently leave her body as a child, but never thought of it as a special ability, and then was trained in remote viewing and worked for the government and solved some very specific crimes with her skills.
I think that is just more validation that, well, okay, it's interesting, because we actually have one story in season 2 about someone who takes psychedelics and is able to find like missing children through remote viewing.
It's literally an episode of Black Mirror.
Really?
What?
Yeah.
They need to be under the influence
in this
access
case, this was more of like an elder in, a South American tribe. But
wow.
Yeah.
That's a tool that was used.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to find some children who are missing, like in the jungle, that governments couldn't find. But they finally were like, let's tap in, the elder. And I think it was ayahuasca, and it was a very, sacred thing. It's not like, hey, party, we're at Burning Man. It was like, okay, let's go find these kids. And they did. So if you can turn that stuff on through psychedelics.
And we know what's going on in the brain to some extent with psychedelics. I mean, we have some indications. Yeah.
I mean, I just feel like there's if non-speakers are clearly saying they can do it, and I think it happens quite often. You know exactly where mom is when this was happening, or
you have to look at the overlap, right?
Right.
You have to look at the overlap.
Right. It happens with psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
It happens with these psychic spies. We know governments
meditation,
spend a lot of money. Meditation. Tom Campbell leaving his body and doing. I mean, it happens from so many different things. So that to me is like, that's a slam dunk. Like, how on earth can you describe so many different sects of people having the ability to see something somewhere very far away, something very far away?
So there's an example of someone who's using it to find children. We spoke to Angela.
She's like, would find a criminal at the town that he was in.
Do you have a little bit of sort of an explanation for people if you're like ramping them into this idea? Like, again, the materialist, which has really stuck with me, this conversation.
Yeah.
We brought it up.
Cry a little bit.
And he was like, well, the government has spent money on a lot of stupid things. That doesn't mean that it's true. And I'm like, we spoke to someone
also,
who,
generally speaking, I don't like what the government does a lot of the time.
Yeah,
so I'm like, I can't pick and choose here.
But in my mind, I was like, oh, the CIA is spending their time. And we spoke to someone who was like using this skill to solve crime, I thought maybe that would validate it a little bit for them, and it didn't. But like, I feel like maybe understanding the history and the origins a little bit more.
When maybe one of the non-speakers and their parents are here for like the film or something, you just see it, just experience it. Bring your dad, and then you'll just see the telepathy right here. We can do it. We put the partition down, think of a word, write it down.
Oh my gosh, I would love that.
Yeah,
I would love that.
Experiencing everything you have in creating this content, speaking to the scientists, have you opened up any of your own telepathic or intuitive abilities?
It's so not my focus right now. And I feel like that it needs to be that way. You know what I mean? Like I have to stay fully tethered in the material world and want to be, so that I can, I don't know. I feel like that will be a fun thing to do in 10 years, or like when I'm more retired.
But you do open up a bit about some of your personal life in the, you know, kind of between seasons 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So I think that's also an important part of the story.
Yeah.
That you are also open to saying, if we broaden the lens of what we believe is possible, it doesn't have to be something that we can't question personally.
Right.
Right.
And I'm questioning all of it personally. The thing that I'm like, I think it could be one choice right now to be like, because I think if you really want to get good at some of the stuff, you have to spend a lot of time doing it. And I think that I'm more open to things. So things are that I might have discounted before are happening.
Okay. I'm going to ask you something I have to ask you.
Okay.
Have you done psychedelics?
I have done, mushrooms.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you had any experience with altered consciousness that you can connect to the kinds of altered consciousness you got to study in the telepathy tapes?
I did like this guided mushroom thing with this shaman who was really good and has done this many, many times and was really supposed to really, and I went with some friends who are like the most G-rated grown-ups. They work at Disney, and and we did this thing together, and everyone had this amazing experience.
Oh no.
And I was being told by the mushrooms the whole time I was not allowed to experience it.
Wow.
And I was doing it like for research. It did feel like, because at this point, like I was headlong in the plant episode. I'm like, wait, what is going on? Like I must be experiencing something.
At least they're talking to you.
Yeah, because I was like, I'm full on feeling like I'm having a conversation with the mushrooms. So I felt like something is obviously altered because I felt that. But then I'd be like, why can't I experience anything? And then the mushrooms would tell me, because we can't even answer that, because if we answered it, you'd be experiencing it. And I'm like, what? We're doing a huge episode on energy healing in the next season. And it was some of the best energy healers ever, I think. And I'm sure we're missing a ton, but some great ones. There's one energy.
This pretty good.
Really? Wow. Okay. So this one energy healer I met, she's like, it's stronger for me if I could do it remotely. And I was like, really? And she goes, yeah, in fact, that's the only time I can remote view. I will go to heal someone and I can tell them what the room looks like, where they're sitting, what they're wearing, all the things about what it is, but I can only do it when I'm entering their space to heal them. And she's like, and I have people come into my office all the time, but it's not as like succinct and perfect as when they're far away. I'm like, because I know I have this big problem going on my left knee. So I was like, can you energy heal me? And she's like, yes, it works better outside. Go be outside. After 40 minutes, she's like, I can't find you. I'm like, what do you mean you can't find me? She's like, it's like there's a bubble around you or a block. I'm like, what? I'm like, well, this sucks. And so I was like, we like go inside and I'm like, can you find me now? Like,
How about now?
Yeah. And then all of a sudden she starts saying, okay, I am getting something. And she starts rattling all this stuff. And I'm like, none of this is true to me. My wife walks in the room. This is so weird. And she's been having this like penetrating pain in her collarbone that's like awful. And she tore her ACL or something in her knee like 5 years ago. But the energy healer starts talking about like this penetrating thing in the collarbone and how bad it is and how I have to get it looked at and how there's something in the knee. She wasn't reading me. She was reading Kaisa. And I was like, what? So it's like, and then I'm like, and I don't know. I mean, I was like, did the non-speakers put some bubble around me or something? I don't know what do you think? Why do you know? What do you know?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Do you want me to do this?
Yeah. I want to know.
I think there's a couple things going on. And what I think is that the the energy around the work that you have done is enormous. It's enormous. And you became famous and infamous, right? In a way that I don't think anyone could have guessed, predicted, or projected. And the reason that it is so important for you to stay grounded is what many scientists in this arena have discovered, which is that if you dip into belief, it can adulterate the research you're doing. And even though, as you said, you're documenting others' research, there has to be a part of you that knows how important it is to preserve the sanctity of objectivity. So while I commend you for trying to go there as an experiment, yeah, I believe that there's a larger wisdom for your path that in some way is not going to allow you to let go that way, because it will give you a completely different lens that is not as objective.
Yeah.
So it's not your path now.
Right.
And one day it may be.
Yeah.
But right now, I think that's really powerful. You may have had the most powerful experience of all, even though it didn't feel like what you thought it would be, which I would say is the description of everyone's life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's such, because I've known that inherently, I'm not allowed to, when I first started answering, I'm I'm not allowed to, I can't.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but you just put words to it.
Yeah.
But it was really funny, coming out of the tent in Topanga Canyon when all my friends were like, I think the trees are breathing and the wolves. And I'm like, you're just kidding me right now?
And you're like, the mushrooms won't talk to me.
Yeah. I went to bed. I was like, all right, well, thank you.
That's amazing. That's an amazing
your
story.
Hungarian roots coming out also right now.
No, that was such a beautiful explanation.
Well, to me, to me, it's not even that there's anything magical about it. Unless unless you believe that the human experience is magical, which I think it is. It's divine in its own wisdom. Right. So it's not like I believe that there's some overlord running the simulation who's like, I'm going to decide to be.
Right.
But what you are putting out is it permeates you, you know?
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Yeah. Or it would just take a much higher dose, literally, to allow you to leave without any.
Well, the guy, the shaman, when he came by and he's like, I'm like, it's not working. And he's like, but I gave you a hero's dose.
Whoa.
He's like, there are so many. This is
well, there are people also who don't metabolize, right? The same way. Yeah. Paul Stamets talked about this with us.
Yeah. But I've done microdoses before where I'm like, this is great. It just feels like.
I agree with everything Mayim said. And also, when you do something like that, your energy field gets dispersed. It's not the same as when you go there through a meditation practice, which is a much more integrated experience. And so especially being out there ruffling some people's feathers and getting a lot of energy at you, the likelihood is for your own safety, it's better to stay contained and grounded than to open yourself up at all.
Yeah.
And you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
No.
Now, your journey is now this larger collective journey, and it's very special. And we're so honored that we get to talk to you and be a small part of your journey. And we have so many friends of our podcast who have wanted us to connect, and we're just so grateful. So where can people tune in to season 2?
All right, so season 2 will start October 15th wherever you listen to your podcasts: Spotify, Apple, iHeart, YouTube, Amazon, wherever it is, Art19, we're there. And the film will be out early next year.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. I got nothing else to say. From our breakdown to the one we hope you never have, we'll see you next time.
It's Mayim Bialik's breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you. She's got a neuroscience PhD or 2. One fiction, and now she's gonna break down